For 40 years, I've walked the line between worlds and am well versed in death. But I want to have faith in humans. Give me something to believe in. Earth below me, sky above me, fire within me. Brought to you by UPRN Network. I'm Trish MO, and this is The Missing Piece.
You are listening to UPRN, United Public Radio Network, coming to you live on 105.3 right up to 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. UPRNtalkradio.com.
All right, everybody, it's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcasts. There's an amazing show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. The Outer Realm in the category of Best Female Hosted Podcast. The Outer Realm is a very popular show hosted by Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, which boasts millions of listeners each week who are well known for and have been complimented on their very laid-back, roundtable style of interviewing. Together, this dynamic duo brings you the best of the best with guests from around the world who are well versed within their respective fields of ufology, paranormal, esoteric, and other areas of high strangeness and more. So go to podcastawards.com to nominate The Outer Realm in the category Best Female Hosted Podcast. That's podcastawards.com, and please take a moment and do it now. Hey there. It's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcasts. There's an amazing show. Hey there. Hey there. It's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcasts. There's an amazing show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. The News on the Flip Side, in the category of Politics and News. News on the Flip Side is a much different news and political program which is not deemed as opinion news. Listen as Joe Montaldo brings to you just the facts from trusted sources which will allow you, the people, to make up your own minds on the various stories being reported on. Go to podcastawards.com to nominate News on the Flip Side in the category of Politics and News. That's podcastawards.com, and please take a moment and do it now.
I did it again. Do I have sound now? Thank you all. Thank you, Kathy and Sebastian. Why do I do every time? Every time. Can you all hear me? Maybe. Hopefully. So I was just talking to Joe about all the technical difficulties that we have and we experience, and people who are very empathic and sensitive to electricity and stuff. Tanner and I talked about this. I told them it does not matter. I was early tonight, got everything set up. My computer shut down, and that was about 45 minutes ago, maybe more. But then I got, it was up and it was fine. And then I go into the back room of StreamYard, and all of a sudden I lose my complete access to my camera and microphone. And so of course here we are starting like an hour late. And Joe's like, "Are you ever going to be on time?" We'll have to see. I'll have to show up like 3 hours early just to do it. Or start pre-recording. But people hate it when I pre-record things because um, then they can't make fun of me as much, I think. So so there's that. Anyways, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining tonight on the missing piece. Um, I do want to talk about it's actually become very important this last week. Anyways, I've been seeing a lot of symbolism and things working up and building up to this energy of 7-Eleven, which is today. So I want to talk about that. I was talking about my experience in Wamego, Kansas, which is home to the notorious Boomtown USA, they call it. It is people come from all over the world actually to attend this. And Wamego is home of the Oz Museum. Once a year they have, I think they have like the Munchkins from the Wizard of Oz um, at their annual Tulip Festival, and they do a lot of neat little things there. It's right outside of it's about 15 minutes from Manhattan, Kansas, and um, and also close to Fort Riley, Kansas. So I went there, but I should have known. And as I was saying, I don't know how much you all missed before my microwave. I was gonna say my microwave. My microphone came back on. Um, but when we were so the last time I went there, I took my kids there. It's been a few years since I've been. Um, Coming home, there was no storm that night or anything, but coming home, there's these really big hills out in the middle of nowhere in Kansas in the Flint Hills that I have to go over to get back to where I currently live. And um, all of a sudden, I come over a hill and a man had hit, I see a sheriff's car and a guy standing with him, and then a vehicle that was totaled and something just all over the highway. And a man had hit a black Angus cow, which or and they're huge if you know how big one of those is in Kansas. That's like the Kansas black gold. So he hit this cow, and it's pitch black out there in the middle of the Flint Hills, right? So and the sheriff, I was the first one to come upon this accident, and the sheriff tells me, he said, "Yeah, just be careful, ma'am. An entire herd got out of a fence somewhere up here, so they're scattered all over the highway." Meaning their live ones are walking around on the highway out there in the middle of the night. Because by that time, it's probably like 12, 1 o'clock by the time traffic and the fireworks get over and everything. So I was like, oh, great. So there's just massive pitch black cattle all over the roads here. And the roads, those specific ones are really dangerous. So this year, of course, I'm always optimistic. I don't um, ever expect bad things to happen. But on the way there, a guy on a motorcycle got in front of me and came over the first hill, and I saw him move over into the opposite lane. And this was just a 2-lane highway, so he was in oncoming traffic. And no, I mean, this is still in the middle of nowhere, so nobody's coming over. Nobody was in the other lane, obviously, but it's at the bottom of a hill, which is pretty dangerous, to get over. And I was like, what in the heck? I couldn't see what he was getting over for. Two black cattle crossed the highway. And I was like, oh, that's not good. That happened once before. So only this time it was during the day. Again, the thunder moon energy of, the July full moon was on the 3rd, and that we're still in that energy on the 4th and 5th. Um, so anyways, I kept driving. I got there, parked. We probably had to walk about 7 or 8 blocks, which actually, that's not that far unless there's a tornado coming. Then it's far. Yes, that's my life. But so anyways, we park, we walk there, and they moved the show up an hour, I assume due to the storm. So we got there like 5 minutes before it actually started, and we saw the Kansas storm trackers. They have their big vehicle out there that they chase like tornadoes and stuff with. They're taking, like, doing studies and taking pictures. And if you ever see, I mean, that's an amazing job. It would be fascinating to do that. I don't know if I could do that. I'd probably get struck by lightning, but I have complete respect for them and what they do, because they gather so much information and research and everything else to the field of storms. Plus, it's got to take some balls to get out there and do that. So you're out there in the middle of the storms. So anyways, I passed them and I'm like, oh, maybe this must be the real thing, as far as storms go, because they only come out. Um, they usually come out when they think a bad one's coming. So I see them, we go sit down, the fireworks start, and since I'm a photographer, however, I do have electronic issues. So of course, my professional camera, my Nikon, um, I had charged multiple batteries. Those went out as soon as we got there. My camera wouldn't function, of course. So I did have to use my phone. So I'm probably going to put a lot of those on my website, because as far as the pictures go, because they're not just for people to see, not to purchase or anything, because they're not as good of quality as I would have had otherwise. But it was interesting. So we're watching the fireworks, and in the background, it's just lighting up the sky. Like, you see these huge strikes of lightning. What was interesting about this is, and I can only get it in slow motion. I've still got to edit. I just had my phone on video, because I was hoping to be able to capture some of the major lightning strikes, the um and get still pictures out of those videos. So, but some of those, it was lighting up the whole sky, only striking when it would light up the entire sky, strike in one place, which was interesting to me, over and over and over and over. And I'm curious as to what is in that location. I would have to kind of narrow it down on a map, based on the pictures, to see where the lightning was striking. But when it would light up the entire sky, this was like a movie or something. It looked like, with all the special effects, because you have all the fireworks going off. And I mean, this is like, that's what they're known for, is their fireworks. So there's so many fireworks going off. But in the background, it's like, it goes with the Wizard of Oz. It's like, what's behind the curtain, right? So you've got this curtain of fireworks that's creating this entire show that everybody's paying attention to. However, in the background, which this is a perfect, um not symbology, what was I going to say, symbolism, kind of what like the government does, and politics and news, everything like that does, because and that's why I purposely had this background. Like, you don't know what's going on behind my green screen thing, right? You don't know what's back here, what's behind me, or if there's people, if there's, like, if I'm where I'm at, what I'm doing, nothing. You don't know any of that. You just see this holographic illusion in front of you, right? So that's what the fireworks remind me of, because so here you've got this curtain of fireworks. Behind it, you can see something and you can hear something, but it has the same look and sound as what's going on in front of you, basically. Because lightning is bright and thunder could sound like fireworks, right? So, but on top of that, which is interesting because given the location, for one, Wamego is very close to Jeffries Energy Center in Kansas, which is one of the major ones here in the Midwest. It's also close to a major military installation. It's also close to the Nuclear Bio Defense Center in Manhattan, Kansas. So Manhattan's, a location that's kind of in the middle of all of these major, I guess, targets in other areas. And so I found it fascinating. In these videos, I'm really gonna have to slow them down because it's one of those things where you're like, "W- what was that shadow in those clouds? Like what? That almost looked like some sort of laser or something. Is that really lightning? It's one of those things. And I know there's so many conspiracy theories about these things and stuff. But due to my past experiences with extraterrestrials and things like that, ET contacts or mill abs, things of that nature. Um, I know 100% when there's no lightning in the sky and there's no thunder, and you can be out in the middle of nowhere in Kansas and see very odd shaped clouds and see, know 100% that there's obviously something else, that the cloud's covering something else, and that's been around for quite some time now, as far as the theory behind those technologies. So that was interesting. So we leave, after the fireworks display. We get to the car, and then I'm like, oh man, how am I going to get out of here? Because even once we got to the car, there's still thousands of people trying to get out of this town, and there's a storming, right? So it's like sitting ducks where like tornadoes can drop on a town out of nowhere within a matter of seconds. Especially at night, it's scary because you have no idea, you can't see them, amongst the clouds. And so um, it took me quite a while to get out of there. And on a normal visit, I would have stayed after the fireworks display. They have bands and vendors and food trucks and things like that. I would have waited. I would have gone to eat or watch the band or something and waited until most of the people had left. Um, but because of the storm, everything shut down. Nobody was going to stand out in the middle of this field, and wait to get rained and hailed on, and especially me. Like I'm like a lightning rod out there. I certainly don't want to stand in out there. So I drive, I get in the line of cars and just start driving. We were hit. There were 80-mile-per-hour winds. We had hail. It was flooding. You have to cross numerous rivers um between right outside of Wamego, bridges as far as that goes. So there's all this flooding. Can't see anything. It's pitch black. It's not like being in a city. There's not street lights out in the middle of the Flint Hills. But there was a very long line of cars. So I guess there was some comfort in that. Like if something were to happen to you, at, at least there's witnesses. There's people in that they're either in front of or behind you. And so it came to a point where I had three different directions to go, and I could have gone one way that was the way I came, but that's where the cattle were on my way. And I'm like, I don't know if I should go that way. That's kind of a bad omen. It's like a black cat crossing the street in front of you. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. There was another way towards Topeka. And at that point, this was like, it's kind of like being at a crossroads, like a fork in the road. Which way are you going to go? And it's one of those decisions that literally is either going to save your life or change your life or possibly kill you, that you have to make. And so um I didn't want to go the way I came. I knew that. Topeka, I was like, I could go around that way. So I turned on the radio, and it said that the storm was coming right down I-70, which is the interstate. and right towards Topeka. And I was like, oh, that's not good. I can't go that way. Like it'll be getting there right when I get to the interstate, So I would have hit the majority of the storm there. So I was like, man, guess I'm just gonna chance it. I'm gonna go this way. So I stayed on that road. And here's how people this happens to everyone. Um, but most people don't pay attention to the synchronicities in their life and the little messages, because the universe interacts with us all the time, and everybody quite literally is in their own world, because we all have a different perspective, so we manifest that. um, Hi, Pam Harris. Thank you for she said she's new here. I hope you're well also. Thank you for joining us. um, hi- i'm I'm probably the least I want to say predictable person you might see on the network, because I never even know what I'm doing myself. Hell, I might not even know what day it is half the time. So there you go. But anyway, so back to my story. So here I am, faced with these three decisions. So the first two are out, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm gonna take the third one, right? But then I'm by myself. Like there was nobody around me because I had to turn off. And right when I turned off, in this small town, I went a few blocks, and then there was a street sign that said Morris. It was said Morris Street, and which is my last name, and right below, like on that same sign, there was another sign that said funeral home, and it pointed to the direction that I saw the cows crossed in front of me when I came. And I was like, ooh, good thing I didn't go that way. Like that would have been my funeral, right? But see, that's what I'm talking about. Like, and I barely saw the sign. Like it lightninged and lit up when I passed this little street, and I was still by myself. There were no cars at that point in front of me or behind me, but I was still in this town. Granted, it was probably a town with like 5 streets or something, which was even more interesting that I passed a road like that. Um, Although that things like that happen every single day in my life. So I'm like, okay. My daughter was with me. I was like, I guess we're gonna do this. We're gonna go this way. Like, I mean, you got to commit to those because in Kansas, you can't stop in the middle of a storm. It's kind of like life. Like if you're going through hell, you keep on going. Like you don't stop. Because most people would think that in a bad storm, you would pull off the road, right? No, it's flooding, okay? So if you pull off the road in Kansas, well, 90% of the time, most of the people that we saw pull off the road probably weren't from here, or maybe they're from a different part of Kansas, because there aren't shoulders on the roads there. So if you pull off the road before a bridge, you're probably going to fall in a ditch, especially if it's flooding. And that did happen to quite a few people we saw. But I can understand, I was scared too. Like, I'm like, oh, this is getting bad. This is like the rain that, you got your knuckles are white on the steering wheel and you're driving. You're like, oh man, I hope I make it through this one. But again, as with life, there's storms like that where you just keep getting hit. And I feel like that's been my life recently, actually. But you keep getting hit with with different storms and chaos, which is perfect for July, because July is, that month of chaos. But it brings change, it brings um, transition, and it brings transformation and new beginnings. Um, so I keep driving. I finally made it home. It took me like, I don't even know, like 2.5 hours. I was going 20 miles an hour, and didn't stop. The storm, like it ripped off the weather seals on the side of my car and stuff. That's how fast the wind was blowing, and it was scary. But again, you just don't ever stop in those. Like especially in the Midwest, especially if you're on the road by yourself in the Midwest, because no telling what, like something, you could go off in a ditch and they might never find you because a storm drops out of nowhere, so next time I think I would probably either get like a hotel room And since I don't live close by there anymore, or and that way, at least I know I have shelter to stay in if there's a storm. Um, or I don't know, just plan it better. But it was an amazing experience. I do actually love thunderstorms. I love the energy of them. I know most people would be like, "What is wrong with you? You should be, after being like struck by lightning and electrocuted and stuff, you should be terrified of storms." No, I love them. And obviously we have to have storms, otherwise we wouldn't have rain, and no rain, no flowers, right? So anyways, on to tonight. I wanted to talk about the significance of um 7-Eleven, and why that is um spiritually um so symbolic for the day. And where this came about, actually, I never really thought much about it, especially years ago before I was really spiritual or anything. I didn't pay much attention, but so I had sorry, I got distracted with that. I had gone to a gas station. I stopped to get gas at a 7-Eleven gas station. Now I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they have those overseas, but I know they don't have them in parts of the United States either. So comment if you're familiar with what a 7-Eleven is, because it I feel like I don't see them in that many states anymore. Um, but regardless, there is. Sorry, I was there. I go again, like completely glitching, and my face is frozen in a very awkward. Um, so, so Pam says yes. Yes. Where are you from, Pam? You don't have to. I mean, you don't have to answer specifically if you don't want to. Just the general location. Really, I didn't know. So Kathy says Canada has them. I didn't know Canada would have um, 7-Elevens. I don't even know that much about the company, like who owns it, who runs it, anything. Um, they're bought out by Village Pantry. See, yeah, I didn't know that. Um, so I got gas there years ago. This was the first time I ever noticed it. Um, okay, Indiana. So that's fairly close to Kansas. Um, so I noticed on the receipt, which this was really interesting to me. The receipt said, "Thank heaven for 7-Eleven," really big and bold at the top of the receipt. And I thought, huh, that's interesting. Like it's just not something you would expect from a gas station receipt, that you get. Like I that's what triggered that memory is what inspired me to research the significance of 7-Eleven. So um but it's interesting that Canada would have them too. I know some of them were bought out by what used to be Circle K gas stations. I don't know if anybody remembers those. But Circle K, when I lived in Japan, they had Circle Ks all over the place there too, which was cool. Um, but now a lot of those are the 7-Elevens. So, but anyways, so 7-Eleven, today is the seventh month, 11th day, as most people know in numerology. Anything with dates for the most part. Well, okay, first of all, let's start about with the basics. 11, 22, 33 are all called master numbers, um, because they're, it's double digits of the same number, so giving them more power essentially. So 7-Eleven, though, just the month and the days, would typically be broken down into, you would add the 7 plus 1 to make it a 9 number. Or if you did the entire month, day, and year, it would be 16, which breaks down to a 7 also. So now getting back to the symbolism of that, I'll start with Christianity because well, I'll just do a brief introduction to all of them. So 7-Eleven, because it does hold a very significant spiritual meaning in many, many religions and cultures. In Christianity specifically, just briefly, the number 7 represents completeness and perfection, as it took God according to the Bible, 7 days to create the world. And the number 11, on the other hand, it's often associated in Christianity with chaos and disorder, as it's one more than the number 10, which 10 is considered a complete and perfect number in many cultures, because it kind of represents both the ending and new beginnings, because 10 is the end. As far as it's the first double digit number, but it also breaks down to a 1, so it's also a new beginning, right? um so that's why 7-Eleven combined even is considered a master number, because it represents spiritual awakening and enlightenment. And so it's believed that if you frequently see this number sequence, you're being guided towards a higher spiritual purpose, and are being reminded of your innate spiritual gifts and abilities. So that's very important. So that also explains a lot of, if you've had a lot of electronic problems today, or glitches, or weird things, it's because it is a very high day, as far as the veil being thin, and um, more connection to spirit. So in Hinduism, the number 7-Eleven, it's seven. There's 7 chakras in the body. The 11th chakra being the connection to the divine, so that's very significant as well. And it's believed that by focusing on this number sequence during meditation or spiritual practices, a person can open themselves up to divine guidance and spiritual growth. That's why the chakras are very important, and so is as well as meditation. But as we've talked about before, meditation does not have to be done um, sitting still and being quiet physically all the time. As I was talking to Tanner with um, last time, I can't always meditate that way because I have ADHD. I could go walk around a track and meditate, because that doesn't require that much thinking. I'm going in a circle. I'm in a safe, I mean, hopefully safe, um, path, as far as my surroundings. And aside from, I can kind of put myself on autopilot when it comes to, if there's other people, things like that I have to maneuver around. Um, so that's what that means in Hinduism. Now, in the Kabbalah, the number 7-Eleven represents the 2 pillars of mercy and severity, with the number 7 representing mercy and the number 11 representing severity. Um, it's it's believed that by balancing these 2 energies, um, individuals can achieve spiritual harmony and enlightenment. So overall, the significance of 7-Eleven spiritually is a reminder to remain connected and grounded, to your higher self, and to strive towards spiritual growth and enlightenment. Um, whatever way or method you choose, whether that be through meditation, prayer, um, or just being mindful, of the number sequences. Um, you can tap into some really powerful spiritual energy by doing so, and these specific numbers represent and can be used to enhance your spiritual journey. So now I don't know. So let's see. So Pam said, I do the same thing with numbers 16, 8, 4, 2. All these go into the number Yes. Yes, and that's another thing, the way numbers break down, um, as far as even, odd, or how they, math, geometry, shapes are a big thing. You see shapes, you see geometry, uh, literally everywhere in the universe. I was going to say in the US, of course, in the US, in the entire universe. The universe is literally made up of geometry. Um, and if you start paying attention, you can you start kind of classifying different animals and insects and foods like fruit, vegetables, um, everything really, by shapes and by numbers. Like we classify insects by the amount of legs they have, right? Um, and then certain insects have different shaped body part, like as far as their thorax and things like that. So there's, and then you go into signs, like literal signs. You've got stop signs, you've got regular road signs that are rectangular, you've got yield signs here anyways that are triangles. So those are, and then that breaks down obviously to the number of sides as well. So so numbers are really important, probably so are the planet phases when it comes to numbers, because, and most people don't believe in that or pay attention to that. But I was just talking to some of my regular clients last week and customers that so many people, and I would just watch it happen, came in and said they were having problems with their joints or something. They would randomly start talking about their teeth. um, well, July being in Capricorn this month, the full moon, that directly resides over your skeletal system, your joints and bones, and your teeth. So of course, that's the time you want to take special care of those parts because they're more sensitive during that time. I clearly didn't heed that warning, and I severely injured my elbow in June. And so which now it's still really, really horrible. I'm hoping after this July moon energy that it gets better, but that's why those are important, and to pay attention as far as surgeries, things like that, because it really does make a difference. Um, Now, as far as more specific, um, getting into the 7-Eleven um, symbolism in Christianity specifically, um, as well as the others, I'll get to those. But Christianity is one of the major ones in the world. Obviously, it's a religion that encompasses rich history, numerous traditions. And one which most people probably haven't heard of, because at one time I was very religious in Christianity, um, and so I did learn a lot about it, um, but I never really heard of this tradition as far as practicing or observing a 7-Eleven prayer until, like I said, I saw that gas station ticket that said "Thank Heaven for 7-Eleven." um, and so and this was probably an older custom. It might still be done. It might be done in other, you know, um, branches of Christianity that I didn't study, but the practice referred to praying 7 times a day and at specific intervals. Now I've heard of that before, as far as different times, even in paganism and witchcraft, things like that. The time of day that you set your intention or ritual or what have you is very important as well. Uh, Equally, people tend to eat at noon. We get off work at 5, things like that. So, um, but anyways, each of these prayer times are observed at specific hours throughout the day. They're known as the canonical canonic. I can't say words, hours, and they include the matins. So again, I never studied um, Catholicism or anything that much, but during the early morning, it's called or at dawn or the louts. Prime is early morning. I'm probably mispronouncing. Mid morning is terce. Um, Sext is noon. None is mid afternoon, and Vespers is evening. So each one of those times has their own significance and purpose. They serve as moments of reflection, gratitude, seeking guidance from God, and the practice of the 7-Eleven prayer helps believers stay connected with their faith throughout the day and seek spiritual nourishment. So it's kind of a day of detoxing and re-energizing, apparently, in older Christianity beliefs. Um, it says that specific prayer is more commonly associated with monastic communities. Um, but many Christians outside of those communities also incorporate it in their daily life. Again, it's meant to be a time to pause and reflect and connect, with the higher being um, amidst the busyness of everyday life. So, um, but it's a powerful reminder of spiritual connection and seeking, a higher power's presence throughout the day. Um, in Hinduism, which is, as most of you know, one of the oldest religions in the world, um, and they have very rich. It's rich in rituals as well as practices, um, and many of those have stayed the same throughout history and time. They carry on to the next generations, and so in Hinduism, the number 7 holds great importance as it represents, as we talked about, the 7 chakras. But chakras, if you get into that, and if you've ever studied chakras, those are believed to be the gateways to spiritual awakening and self-realization and everything else. We now know that chakras play a huge role in almost everything we do, as far as uh, what we eat, days of the week, the planets, literally almost everything around us. So um, each chakra, for those of you that don't know, is associated with a specific color and element. And balancing these is considered essential for your overall health and wellness. And as humans nowadays, with the way we live our lives and jobs and things like that, and we're inside a lot, and most people have very unbalanced chakras for that matter. So um, that's important. I don't know how many of you, if in the chat room, how do you have you ever studied the chakras, or do you practice mindful living through the chakra system, or is it like you're like, Trish, I don't even know, I can't even pronounce that word, I don't even know what you're talking about. So let me know. If I said that to, like my son or something, he'd probably be, which is crazy, right? You would think that because I do practice these things a lot that they would know, or and it's just something that, I've made him and his friends and stuff, or my nieces and nephews or whatever, do yoga and all kinds of stuff, or like during football do yoga and stuff. But and I'll tell them why it's important, and I'll mention the chakras and everything. But it just, they're teenagers, it goes over there. They don't care. They're like, yeah, whatever. We're just doing this to make you happy, mom. So does so so I'm trying to find a way to actually teach that to younger people, because I think it is very important. Like, if I had known the importance of balancing your chakras, which essentially balances your energy for everything else, every single thing you do, all the way down to, your immune system and everything, your emotions, your confidence, your just your physical being, your emotional and your intellect. It all has to do with comes down to chakras. So if I had known how important that was when I was like a teenager or even my kids' age, I wish someone would have taught that to me in school, um, because it would have helped, especially being, not being neuro. I'm not neurotypical, so it would have helped a lot in my life to have something like that. Um, and there isn't, because obviously it's like the spiritual practices are very personal to everyone and very controversial as well. So I would never see, I can't see a public school system, teaching such topics. However, I mean, I can see them teaching those topics when in relation to if they're teaching on the topic of religions and things like that. Yes, and history, of course. But I mean, as far as uh, just mindful living overall, there's not a school in the U.S. anyways that would teach something like that, which I think's a huge disservice to kids. So for that matter, we might not have. I do know at one point, there were a lot of schools that were experimenting. I know, I want to say like one school that my son went to did it. Um, because he's been to quite a few inner city schools, where there is a lot of gangs and violence, and schools have bullying and so many things going on. But instead of sending children to these kids that would get in trouble, for fighting or whatever, instead of sending them to detention or suspending them, they would teach them to meditate. Um, and they said that at those specifics, like these test schools, that they were they were attempting to see what the outcome of that would be, as far as the future in that same school system of violence and bullying and threats and things like that, and depression and um, all the things that kids have nowadays, that are seen in those schools. And it actually, of course, it decreased the first of all, it decreased the amount of reoccurrence by those same students, meaning they learned a different outlet to direct their anger or their that energy to. So they didn't have the desire to get in fights or you know um, have outbursts and things like that, which I think is amazing. I think that all schools should do that as well, because if it helped, obviously, um, not having um, a correlation to any specific religion, so it wasn't pissing off all these parents, because everybody's got their own opinion. Um, then I would be all for it. Of course, my kids. As most of you know, I pulled out of school last year. They were homeschooled the last part of the semester due to specifically to bullying and the amount of kids at my son's school. He went to a very very large school, but very that school was notorious for fights and gangs and things like that. And that's not the other half the students that were involved. Well, a lot of them that were involved in those things um, had many, suicidal tendencies and things like that, threats, and that's terrible. That's terrible when it comes to that age, because that's such an essential age to have a sense of peace in their lives. And um you can't do that if you're going to school every day like dreading going there. And it got to a point where it seemed like even the teachers, in those school systems don't care. But I mean, you can't blame them much, because it literally, I don't know if any of you have seen um Dangerous Minds with Michelle Pfeiffer. It was probably in the 90s that movie came out, 90s, early 2000s. But she became she got a teaching job at an inner city school, and these kids, half of them didn't show up to class all the time. Some were in gangs, some didn't have parents, some had parents that were addicts and or abusers or things like that. And that's really what it reminds me of in Topeka. It's gotten that bad that um, I remember on my son's football team, there were kids that um, even when he was younger, when he was in middle school for that matter, there were kids that they loved being able to have a sport to go to after school because that meant that they didn't have to go home to whatever, to a drunk parent or a parent on drugs or somebody that was going to abuse them. And so it was really hard on them at the end of the season seeing those things. Um, and again, how does this have? I don't know. I get off on random tangents all the time. So y'all are used to that too. Um, now, let's see, Hinduism. There's something important I was going to say about that. Oh, yes. Um, so the chakras are believed to be gateways um, to your seven different energy centers in the body, um, and each one being associated with a different color and element um, is equally important. So for instance, certain days associated with certain chakras, and you want to eat foods of that color because that would balance and raise the vibration of that chakra. For instance, let's say your heart chakra is on Wednesday, right? So heart chakra, so that's going to be represented by the planets are Venus and the moon. And then foods you would want to eat on that day would be um, green foods, obviously, but I mean quite literally kale, broccoli, zucchini, avocado, things like that to raise the vibration, help balance that chakra specifically. Um, so 11 in Hinduism symbolizes the union of two separate entities, representing harmony and balance. Um, so it was believed that when two people came together and their energies combine, it creates a stronger force that can overcome any obstacles. So then that goes back to like the yin and yang, theories. Um, and in astrology, the positions of those celestial bodies at the time of one's birth are believed to heavily influence their life journey. And that's actually what caused me to dive more deeply into Hinduism is I started to notice the patterns in my own life and how absolutely the planets you're born under, the different how the celestial bodies and that influence our lives every day. So, and the outcome of different things. Um, So the number 7 in Hinduism still is associated with Ketu, the south node of the moon, while the number 11 is associated with Rahu, the north node. Um, and those also are believed to have a profound impact on your personality traits as well, which is where you get into more of the astrology aspect. But they can be seen in Hindu and in many, many of their festivals, rituals. Um, for instance, during the festival, I can never say this, Navratri, which lasts for 9 nights. Um, again, 7, 11, 9. Um, Devotees worship the goddess Durga in her various forms, and on the seventh day, known as the Maha Saptami, special prayers and rituals are performed to honor the goddess and seek her blessings. Um, Similarly, the festival of Diwali also known as the Festival of Lights, which most people are familiar with, is celebrated over a period of 5 days. And on the second day, which falls on the 11th lunar day of the Hindu month, Kartik, people worship the goddess Lakshmi. Lakshmi, yes, which is the symbol of wealth and prosperity. So um, that's interesting to note as well. Um, all of those play a crucial role in everyone's lives. So moving on to Kabbalah, which is I've done it. Well, as with any religion, it would be impossible to completely study everything that goes along with it. But because they're all very, very complex. But I've researched Kabbalah a little bit, um, and it's an ancient Jewish mystical tradition. They're known for very complex teachings and deep spiritual insights. But one specific aspect of Kabbalah is the significance it places on numbers. And each number is believed to hold a unique energy and symbolism. Um, so the number 7 is considered highly sacred because it represents completion, perfection, and the divine order of creation. According to Kabbalistic texts, the world was created in 7 days, um, each day representing a different aspect of creation. So the number 7 is also associated with the 7 lower sephira, well, the divine emanations of the Kabbalistic tree of life. So these represent different spiritual qualities that exist within the divine and human realms, and most people are familiar with the tree of life, as well as um, you know 7 days in a week, things like that. um, and if you kind of focus in your own life, I do that a lot because it's hard for me. I get overwhelmed, being autistic and having ADHD. Like, I get overwhelmed with too much. Like, I have tons of planners, and I but even when I look at it, if I see a whole week, I'm like, okay, I have all this stuff to do, or I have all this stuff I want to do, or content, or whatever. I'm like, where do I put it? There's so much, like, I don't even know where to start. So then I end up not starting, then I end up not doing it and not completing my goals for that week. And it's a vicious cycle. But if you consider each day in your own creation creation of the week, technically, um, and you kind of place a different day each day representing a different aspect of whatever you want to create that week for yourself. um, that's kind of how I break down things in my own life. So um, and I think that's probably relevant in many religions, actually. um, so in Kabbalah, they believe that the 7 being completion and transformation, 11 symbolizing kind of the journey of the soul towards spiritual perfection and enlightenment. So when you combine those to create a stronger power, then that's why it's a sacred combination in that religion as well. Um, Now paganism, there's so many different paganism encompasses such a diverse range of beliefs and rituals that it's sometimes hard to keep up with. It's hard to um, decipher. But again, that there's no right or wrong when it comes to how you choose to live your life, or what you believe in, or what religion, or even what rituals. Even in my own practices, I don't practice every single holiday. I don't observe every single ritual or Sabbath. things like that. It's whatever's relevant in your own life and what it means to you. But paganism, since there are so many, it's such a diverse range of beliefs and rituals. Um, but overall, there's always been a great significance given to numbers. Um, and so in paganism, um, similar to Hinduism, we observe chakras and their connection to different aspects of our being, as far as um, each one representing you know different aspects of our physical, emotional, or spiritual functions, um, and the balance of those being important. Um, But for most pagans, seeing any master number, which 11 is the first one, um, indicates that, well, it's how you decipher it. Like, it can indicate either something really good or really bad, I guess, in your life. Um, but it's a powerful number regardless. Um, the number 11, being a master number, is associated with the concept of duality and balance, and so it represents the union of opposites, such as the light and the dark, the masculine and the feminine, um, back to the yin and the yang. And and it's important to embrace both positive and negative aspects of life to achieve harmony, because, as you all know, there's always, our lives are an ebb and flow. It's kind of like those hills, you go up and you go down, you go up and you go down, you go through storms and you go through. um so it's really about perspective on those, because we can't ever completely dodge every storm in our life. We can't ever completely rid our lives of negativity and things like that, because things are always going to happen. um and so, but there are different rituals that pagans perform, as far as intention and things like that, based on, um, like making 7 offerings to honor the 7 celestial bodies, or during a meditation session, specifically focusing on the number 11 can help facilitate spiritual growth and self-discovery. Um, so that's why that's really important to note as well. Um, Now, as far as most of you, what in your life do you do as kind of a daily ritual? So, there's things, like I said, that we do every single day. We don't even pay that much attention to it unless you start researching it and you realize that maybe subconsciously you actually did know something about it, because it might be a specific time you brush your teeth, or in the morning, or after, whatever it is. We perform rituals all the time of different things. um do you take a moment to journal? Um do you plan your year out, your goals? Do you, speaking of duality, July, Christmas in July is big in in the US, because everything on on the opposite side of the world, in the southern hemisphere, is going on right now. The weather, everything's opposite at that time right now. So no different with the months Christmas and July. It's it's specifically, um like the opposite side of the flip side of the calendar, basically, that we know. um so that's kind of how I go about a lot of things. If I want to manifest something in the fall, I know, especially if it's something um, really significant to me, and really that I'm going to have to work on a lot, I know that it will probably come to fruition, quite literally, in the spring and more towards the summer. So that even goes back to farmers and how they plant. Being in Kansas, how they harvest, how they plant things. Obviously, You plant a seed in the fall, in the summer it's going to bloom, it's going to become it's going to come to fruition. It's going to be something that you can actually see and hold and focus on, and that's how the universe works. So if you think of numbers, constantly, because numbers are infinite. They could literally go on forever. um but broken down, there's really only, you know well, technically 9 numbers. um Even in the different theories of different realms, there's that book. I'm gonna have to look it up now. There's a book called The Nine Realms. um and in many cultures and beliefs, once you get to 11, the one of the highest realms of spirituality, 12 is believed to be chaos. Like, it's believed that the literal infrastructure of any of our dimensions would come crashing down on top of each other, because it's it's finished. Like, there's nothing after that. So, um but then I also think of, like, there's others with the number 11, like Stranger Things. They named her 11, the girl that gets experimented on, um which is interesting. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what, you see all these movies with numbers as well. I was thinking of, I Am Number 4. There's, gosh, I don't know how many there were in that movie. Um, does anybody know that? How many gifted people were they looking for in the movie I Am Number 4? Um, I just know that that's what I want to say it was like 6 or something. I don't know. Gosh, however, I didn't know until just now that that movie came out in 2011, which is funny. I remember the movie Seven, if anyone's ever seen that. That was one of the most terrifying movies I've literally ever seen in my life. Um, but that's what really got me interested in, the acting in that movie. It's got Brad Pitt and, oh my gosh, what's his Norton, um, Edward Norton, I believe, in it. Um, Nobody knows how many people they were looking for in I Am Number 4. Oh my goodness. Uh, huh. I also never knew that there was supposed to be a second one of that movie, and it was shelved. Um, but if you haven't seen it, it's an amazing movie. It's a young adult, science fiction. Well, the book, anyways. Like, before the movie. That's how I read that. Um, it's based on a story of, oh, I think it was 9. Yeah. So it was of John Smith. He's one of 9 Lorik children, who escaped from their planet before it was destroyed by the Mogadorians, a hostile alien race. And this guy, and he's like a teenager, and his guardian, are on the run from the Mogadorians, who are hunting the Lorik in numerical order. And John's the 4th Lorik and must survive, um, long enough to develop his powers and be able to fight back. And it's something about, like, I feel like they have a number tattooed on their arm, and every time one of them is killed, it changes numbers, and that's what, um or like one of the numbers is erased or whatever. And so he's supposed to be like 15, I believe. It's a great movie though. But that's another one of those that's interesting because of all of the numeric symbolism. And this moon thing's really, it's really creeping me out. Like you can only see it on one side there. Hopefully, so I know I've been working really, really, really hard on this. I'm so excited for it though, because I've actually finally kind of got everything's coming together. So for those of you that know, like I've been working on one website, but I've been working on this for like 6 months. But the reason, I mean, I've had a lot of transition interruptions in my life as well. You know, I was homeless there for a while, and when my house sold, and traveled for a little bit and all these other things. But um, I have three I three different companies that I'm merging together. So I'm going to merge my photography, well, not really merging, but I'm just putting them all in one place so it's easier for everybody to find, because sometimes people find like my studio or my website or whatever, and they don't even know I'm the same person that like does something else that I sell there, you know, because I started years ago with Lenore Vintage Beauty. That was with different like makeup, herbal remedies, um, handmade things, candles, things like that. And then I started Trish MO's photography, and I was on a smaller scale before I started doing more artistic type photography. And then I started Savage Roots, which was the name of my studio in Topeka, and it was Savage Roots Alchemy. And the name was inspired from, you know, my roots are have very different directions, I want to say. So, you know, I have a background in the Scottish and Irish, I guess, area, as well as African, as well as Native, um, in the Southwestern America. Um, and so once I started studying genealogy and realizing, you know, all of my ancestors and the paths they took and the struggles and obstacles that they overcame, that's why I called it Savage Roots Alchemy, because it's quite literally a transformation within our very lineage, you know, that has followed our DNA since the beginning of time. And it's the same, you know, I'm sure it's that way with literally everyone. If you start, it's one of those things, like I always say, if you start searching for the truth, you'll find it. You know, you'll find why certain things happen. You'll start to see the patterns in your own family line, and why certain things happen the way they do, or why they had to happen that way. And you'll really form a greater appreciation for things like that, because it's changed my perspective on literally everything. You know, many things that I thought were terrible in my life or bad when they happened. Um, Once I learned the background of the person that in my own family that caused those things, you know, I started to understand why they had to happen. And so Savage Roots was the other one I started. That was right before um, I started as a co-host on Chasing Prophecy, which was a lot of fun. Um, but again, you know, me being crazy and awkward and neurodivergent, I was I'm just different from I'm different from most people, but I was different from my co-hosts a lot, and and they're all great. Don't get me wrong. Um, but that's when I branched out. You know, Joe. wanted me to do, and I started my own show, and that was literally, it was like a year and a half now. I started in January of last year on the missing piece. So with all of that, I've combined all these. That's why it's taken me so long. So I have had to combine. I mean, they each have their own page, of course, obviously, but I've had to put them all on one platform, hosted by, and it's a lot to keep up with it's a lot to keep up with one. So I have The Missing Piece, Savage Roots Alchemy, Lenore Vintage Beauty, Trish MO's photography, and then of course my blog, and my lifestyle blog, um, Lenora Lore. And that one specifically is where I'm like, okay, I need one place where I can talk about literally all of my crazy adventures. My daughter and I were just talking about that earlier. She's like, you literally are like Wednesday Adams, and have been for a long time, because one thing always leads to another, and here I am investigating something, whether it be a cold case, a missing persons, paranormal, cryptid, historical, what have you. And it always leads to something else that directly impacts my life. And here I am. And so that's what Lenora Lore is going to be about. But I wanted one place to have all of that. And I already bought the domain and everything. I've got the website almost done. I've even written numerous blogs for it. So I should have that. You can watch that in the coming definitely before the end of July. So, um, and I'll have all of my, I do a lot of digital art and design and graphics and things like that. Um, so I'll have all of that on there as well. I've made a ton of different healthy cooking videos. I've um, just a lot of fun stuff. Like people find it entertaining to see how my brain works in that aspect, I guess. Um, So that will be watching for all of that. Um, and as far as that goes, we are, um, gosh, almost at the. Oh yes, I will have the link. You can go to my store. You can, I'm going to have a lot of um, my different graphic prints, that you can, or photography, things like that you can make into posters or calendars or whatever you want. I design a lot of things. I get, I'll work on something be hyper focused on like painting for a few weeks, and then I'll change to drawing, and then I'll change to like graphic art, and because I get bored easily with one thing. So that's why I have so many. So that being said, thank you all for joining. Did anyone have any questions? Like, nobody's talking in the one day that I finally get it figured out and able to interact with the chat room, and nobody's talking much. I do appreciate you all that were. Sebastian, thank you, and Pam, for letting me know um, that I didn't have sound, as well as Kathy. Everyone in the chat room, thank you for joining. And you can, so I did want to mention, if you saw last week's archive of my conversation with Ray Bishop, it was very popular that I replayed that. That was actually from a year ago, when I was very new to hosting my own show. Obviously, I still don't know what I'm doing. And and it is, it's all over the place. But I did reach out again to Ray Bishop. He wrote Outlaw, and his story is absolutely amazing as far as his transformation. Um, so I do want to have him on the show again. He did agree to come on with me in the near future, and but I also want to pick his brain about, he grew up. I was born outside of Roswell, New Mexico. He was born and raised near, it's the equivalent of UK's Roswell. So it's what is it, the Rendlesham Forest. Um, So, and he has many experiences, surprisingly, as far as UFO experiences. So I can't wait for that. I do want to pick his brain on that. That's coming up in the near future. And otherwise, thanks again for Carnation sponsoring the network. And for all my listeners out there, you can listen to any of my archives or past shows, or this show even, on all of your favorite, that was weird. That was my cat sneezing, but on all of your favorite podcast stations. So without further ado, have a wonderful week. Start focusing on your chakras and balancing those. And we will catch you next time on The Missing Piece. Have a good night.
You are listening to UPRN, United Public Radio Network, coming to you live on 105.3 right up to 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. UPRNtalkradio.com.
It's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcasts. There's an amazing show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards, Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast, in 3 categories: education, storyteller drama, and art. For 4 years, the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast has provided advice and tips from international best-selling authors, world-class artists, contest judges and winners, and industry professionals, based on the world-famous Writers of the Future contest created in 1983 by L. Ron Hubbard to help the aspiring writer and artist, no matter their age. It is dedicated to the future of storytelling and art by showing that it is never too late to start, and those who make it are those who never give up. Go to podcastawards.com to nominate the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast in any or all of the 3 categories: education, storyteller drama, and art. That's podcastawards.com, and please take a moment and go out and vote now.
Looking for stories that are fresh and new? Dark fantasy, humor, space exploration, time travel, cyberpunk, alternate history, and more. They're in the L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future Anthology, from 24 award-winning authors and illustrators, plus art and writing tips and bonus stories. L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future. Buy your copy at galaxypress.com, Amazon, or wherever books are sold.